Hello, I'm David Cohen, CEO of Fluence, and this is Fluence Unfiltered. I'm here with Safira Galoub, Executive Director of the National Cannabis Roundtable, and you're watching another installment of our series on federal cannabis legalization. In our last episode, we talked about the Safe Banking Act, but there's one more bill that's been in the news lately, the MORE Act. So the MORE Act is quite different. And again, I hear the same things. You look at posts on LinkedIn, you look at the news, you look at any social media, the MORE Act's about to pass, cannabis is going to be legalized. Right. Again, this is incremental. What is it? How's it different than SAFE? Why is it important? Same question, same story, really to understand it.
So I'm going to open up the aperture a little bit more. And it's mostly because I want individuals who are watching this, when they read the news, to be able to kind of better understand, we'll call it the legislative ecosystem in which it sits. So now we've moved from incremental, we were talking about banking, and now we're talking about legalization bills. There are actually 4 legalization measures currently in Congress. The MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, is a piece of legislation that has now passed out of the House 2 times because its sponsor and lead is the chairman of the lead committee of jurisdiction, the Judiciary Committee, and that's Gerald Nadler. The Senate, through Leader Schumer, will have his version of legalization, and that is the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, the CAOA. They're both legalization bills. There are 2 more bills that I think are really important. One of them was introduced by a freshman Republican member of the House named Nancy Mace. It's a pretty broad bill. It's kind of like a barn doors open, everything is good to go on day one. It's not very realistic, and I'm not certain who it helps and who it hurts. I think that jury is still out, but it's a legalization bill with a low tax rate, so MSOs like it for that reason. And then there is a bill by a Republican, David Joyce, who I mentioned before, and it's more of a sequencing bill, right? It says that upon day one, certain things happen to address criminal justice and leveling the playing field, but then we have some things that have to be worked out before descheduling happens. So 4 measures. The MORE Act, like the CAOA, let's talk about those 2 because we have a Democratic control of the House and Democratic control of the Senate. Those 2 pieces of legislation deschedule cannabis on day 1. That means the day it passes, cannabis is no longer illegal. So all these concerns that we talked about in the incremental, banking and tax, all that goes away because the problems created by cannabis being illegal has been solved. Cannabis is no longer illegal, therefore the problems created by it no longer a problem.
It's descheduled, it's federally legal.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing that the MORE Act does do, I think it's worth noting, is it directs expungements for marijuana convictions back to 1971. And that's a pretty big bite of criminal justice reform. It's, from a kind of humanitarian peace of mind, it's the right thing to do. The mechanism is a little bit fuzzy. And if you talk to folks about how one would implement that, I don't come from a criminal law background, so I don't want to step out of my lane, but it isn't the most straightforward way to, address criminal justice. And it's also very much notable that the majority of convictions for marijuana or for cannabis are on the state level. Federally, right now I think there may be 2,500 to 3,000 people who are currently incarcerated. And let me tell you, that is 2,500 to 3,000 too many. But let's not think that if we pass the MORE Act or the CAOA and we make cannabis federally legal and we get folks out of federal prison, that there aren't more, still towards 1 million folks in state prisons, and that federal law would not.
1 million?
I'm going to use the word towards 1 million, somewhere between 500,000. It's not 2,500. Right. So the vast majority of individuals who are incarcerated in state prisons, and the MORE Act and the CAOA does not address that. So if you're out there wondering what's going to happen to the program in my state, what's going to happen to the regulations I currently have to follow, what's really, really interesting is, irrespective of all the other things that these bills do, they respect the integrity of that state program. And if people wonder, if the big MSOs have an agenda about what happens on legalization in terms of economies of scale, and do they want to have one, facility in one state and be able to distribute it across the country. I want you to think about it from a governor's perspective. If you're a governor and you just invested, hundreds of millions of jobs in your state, and legalization happens, are you going to want all those jobs to go away because Western states have a supply dilemma?
Right.
Cannabis industry stakeholders do not really have to get into the quarrel about what happens upon legalization regarding interstate commerce. Governors are going to take care of that for us. That's what I think. It's my prediction.
There are forks in the road. There are holes in potholes, and Michael's famous saying is, "I don't know if I'm supposed to wear a helmet or a cup to work every day. I don't know where it's coming from." So I think what really distilling down what you're trying to say is make sure you understand what you're getting into. This has been our final installment of our series on federal legalization. Thank you for watching. Next on Fluence Unfiltered, we'll talk to Casey Rivero and Riley Leach, cannabis solution architects for Fluence. If you're getting ready to design, build, or grow a cannabis facility, it's not a series you want to miss. To be alerted when it goes live, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Until then.